Yeah, well, it's also good for the immune system.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I like the lemon and ginger. I like the taste anyhow because it warms me up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so right, it's just gone onto YouTube. So I just want to make sure that there's
Yeah, well,
sound.
it's also good for the immune system.
Ah, okay. Well, there you go. There's a bonus. That's right. Lovely. Okay, so let's get rid of that and go back to where we are on Zoom. There we are. Got it live streamed. All right, lovely, everybody. Okay, welcome. Lovely to see you all. So let's start off with our prayer. So I'm going to share my screen. Where's my prayer gone? Oh, Leah's come in. I've lost my prayer. Here it is. Now, Zoom, share screen. There it is, right. Okay, lovely. ריבון העולמים ואדוני אדונים, אב רחמן וסליחות, מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, בקידה בשתחוויה, שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש, ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו ומה חיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן, אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחור ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו. ואל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך, וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו ליראתך ולבבך, תקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הערל בסודות תורתך, ויהיה לימודנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך קרח ניחוח, ותציל עלינו אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, שיתנוצצו ניצוצות עבדיך הקדושים, אשר על ידם גלית דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבל נקשר בדברים אלו. ובזכותם תראיננו במה שאנו לומדים, כמאמר נעים זמירות ישראל, גל עיני והביט הנפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לרצונים לפי, וגאון ליבי לפניך, Adonai Tzuri v'Gorali. Amen. Ken you Ratzon. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is Parshat Yitro. And of course, Parshat Yitro is phenomenal. I mean, it's just got so much in it. You've got the actual revelation of God coming down on Mount Sinai and giving us the Torah. And of course, there's so many different angles, so many different aspects one could, spend. You could spend the whole year just on this particular sidra. I mean, it's just there's just so much. So what I thought I would do. Oh wait a minute, I've lost how to share screen. Oh, here we go. What I thought I would do is have a look first of all and see what did Rabbi Ashlag write about. What did Rabbi Ashlag share? And I came to Rabbi Baruch Shalom's work. First of all, a tish he gave on a Sudat Shabbat Yitro, also as a letter that he wrote to his students on Shabbat Yitro, where he brought more or less the same ideas. And I saw that they didn't try to sort of like look at, the fact that God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai as a sort of like a big general thing, but he concentrated on what's like two aspects. He took an individual aspect and then through that uh, gave beautiful drushes on what does it mean for us to keep the Torah. And I suppose obviously that's really what we're really looking at. We really want to find out what is the revelation of the Torah for ourselves, not from a historical perspective, but for us here in the present. How can I keep Torah? All right. And what actually is Torah? Torah is a bridge, really, between ourself and God, between ourself and our soul. Because what we know of ourselves is primarily the ego. We know our personalities, we know the ego. This is our nature that we have been given, and this is what we know. But the soul within us, which is the part of ourself which is really eternal, and which is the part of God within us, is a part we don't know. And the Torah is like this bridge, which can bridge between our consciousness and our deepest, truest self, which is the God within. Okay? So Torah is this incredible instruction. It's also enlightenment. All right, and it goes through different stages. We have different relationships with it as we learn, as we practice it. It's not just learning; it's also the practice. So I thought that we got here a couple of articles by Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag, which I thought were very, very interesting in looking at our relationship with Torah through some of the verses that we have here on Parshat Yitro. So we're going to start off with Ko Toma Lebeit Yaakov V'tagid li b'nei Yisrael. This is in, just before the actual giving of the Ten Commandments, when God's telling Moses, how to get the people ready. One of the sentences says, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell to the children of Israel." And there's a very famous Rashi which says, by Midrash, Ko Toma Lebeit Yaakov, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, Elu Hanashim. Okay, these are the women. V'tagid li b'nei Israel, and say it to the children of Israel. That refers to the men. Okay. So Rabbi Ashlag is going to look at this and say, what is this to do with? All right, why was it important? Why did they make this distinction? All right, and we're going to see what it means for us inside ourselves. Emolo, he said to him, that's God said to him, this is from the Midrash, say to the women, sort of like headlines, that they'll be able to understand. V'tagid li b'nei Yisrael, and tell to the men, Amolo, he said to them, Emor lehem diktukei dvarim shem yocholim lishmoa. Tell them all the details of the different matters that they would be able to understand. Okay, dvar acher, another thing. Lama nashim tchila. Why was he meant to tell? Why was Moses told to tell the women first? Shehein mizdarzorot b'mitzvot, because they are more quick to do the mitzvot. Dvar acher, another reason. Kadei shiyu manhigot et b'nehim leTorah, in order that they should bring their children to Torah. Amar Rabbi Tachlifa de Caesarian, Rabbi Tachlifa, who lived in Caesarea, said, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One said, Kshabarati ta'olam lo tziviti el al-adam harishon. When I created the world, I only commanded Adam about not eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. V'achar kach nistavat Chava v'avra v'kilkala ta'olam. And afterwards, Chava didn't obey, and she made a transgression and caused the world to get spoilt. Therefore, I've learned from this that if I don't call the women first, they're likely to nullify the Torah. Therefore, say to the children of Yaakov, to Beit Yaakov first, say to the women first. Now, Rabbi Ashlag brings the Midrash, but he absolutely does not take the Midrash literally. There's a lot of work that Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag, his father, wrote about Midrash, saying that you really cannot take Midrash literally. Midrash is like an orange. You take off the outer peel and you only take the inside. All right, it's very important to understand that about Midrash, because a lot of people, take Midrash and they take it literally. All right, and you learn a lot from Rabbi Ashlag about how to approach Midrash in a better way. I often think about Midrash in a way like Aesop's fables. The sort of story of the hare and the tortoise who have a race, that kind of story. Well, nobody imagines for a moment that there really was a hare and really was a tortoise who ran a race. Okay? You realize it's a teaching tale. In the same way, we need to approach Midrash. Okay? Not to imagine that we're talking literally, but to try to understand the inner meanings of what the Midrash is saying. So this piece that Rabbi Baruch Ashlag wrote is actually very interesting from that perspective as well. So he starts off by asking some questions. V'yesh lishol ha'sheila. Aleph, מדוע נשים מזדרזות במצוות יותר מהנשים? Why are women quicker to do the mitzvot than men? Bet, מדוע יש להקדים נשים מטעם שיהיו מנהיגות את בניהם לתורה? Why should we put the women first? Because they're going to bring their children to Torah. וכי אם יקדימו את הנשים לא יסכימו הנשים לנהג את בניהם לתורה. And if we put the men first, then the women won't agree to bring their children to Torah. ג' כאילו כביכול מפחד מהנשים שלא יקלקלו את העולם, אם לא ייתן להם את הכבוד להקדים אותם לפני הנשים. Is there really some sort of fear that the women will, destroy the world if we don't give them the honor of bringing them first before the men? ד' איך שייך לומר שמפני הכבוד שעשה הקדוש ברוך הוא שציווה על האדם הראשון לפני חווה, אהבה וקלקלה את העולם. וזה דומה כאילו חווה התנקמה עבור זה. How can one possibly imagine that because of the honor that God gave to Adam, more than Chava, that she went and destroyed the world, or ruined the world? It's as if she took vengeance for this. Okay? So Rabbi Ashlag here is pointing out that there's a lot in this midrash that doesn't make too much sense. Okay? But what we can do is we can look at this whole thing as a parable, which is telling us about our inner work for God. All right? This is what he's saying. All right? And he does this a lot with Zohar, a lot with Midrash. Like really to take it all as happening inside oneself. And this is what he says. Shinyan ish v'isha noheg ba'adam echad. That the aspect of the man and the woman is actually different aspects of ourselves. It's all happening in one person. Okay? He's not talking about men as men and women as women. He's talking about different aspects of ourselves. Okay? שבזמן שאדם עושה מעשים על מנת לקבל ולמעלות את חסרונו, היינו הנוקביות שלו, אז האדם נקרא בשם אישה. So when a person does deeds which are actually there in order to fulfill his will to receive and to fulfill his own lacks, right? A lack is a nukva, okay? It's a nukviut. Nukva in Hebrew is like a pocket, or it's something empty, okay? All right? It's like the sheath of a sword. It's the empty pocket, okay? That's his feminine side, all right? Then a man is known by the name of woman, okay? Because he wants to receive. He's got this empty vessel which wants to receive. בזמן שאדם עושה מעשים על מנת להשפיע, but when a person does actions which are for the sake of giving, אזי נקרא בשם ish, then he's called ish, a man. Okay? So we need to understand, and this is actually very important understanding in general, that the male and the female aspects in Torah are actually dealing with issues of giving and issues of receiving. All right, and I think it's very important because, for example, when we make a bracha, all right, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Asher kedishanu, whatever it is, it's translated as He. Okay, you get God as the He an awful lot in the translations, the English translations of the prayer book and of the Siddur and of the Torah. And people get very confused by this, and they sort of get very annoyed, especially nowadays, God is a man. God is not a man. What it means is God in the aspect that God's light is being received or perceived as the aspect of giving. Okay? That is, in the Kabbalah, the male aspect. The female aspect is God's light being received as the aspect of receiver. Okay? Which would be the Shekhinah. Okay, the female aspect. But of course, God is neither male or female. It's just how we perceive that light. Which vessels are we using at the time? So the same thing for the human being. Okay, we have vessels of giving, we have vessels of receiving. Our vessels of giving are called the male aspects. The vessels of receiving are called our female aspects. Okay? So, for example, a woman with respect to her husband can be female because she's receiving from her husband. With respect to her children, she would be male. She would be giving to her children. She would be male. Okay? So that's how male and female actually works. All right? So it goes here. So here he's saying, we can understand this in the way of our inner work. Shinyan ish v'isha, male and female, noheg ba'adam echad, are actually aspects of one person. Shebezman sh'adam osim masim al manat lakabel, when a person does actions of receiving, lamalot et chisonot, fulfill whatever he lacks, hano nukviut shilo, his feminine aspect, as adam nikra b'shem isha, then a person is called by the name of the woman. But when a person does actions of giving, as I nikra b'shem ish, then he's called by the name of a man. And this is known that every man is no more than his will to receive. So the way we begin our service to God starts with our will to receive, because as we said earlier, it's our will to receive, our ego, that we actually know the best. So that's where we have to begin. Okay, we have to begin there. We can't begin, imagining that we've already, able to keep the Torah completely. We have to begin from where we are. All right. I once saw a book. I think it was actually. I can't remember what it was about, but I never read the book, but I saw the title, and the title was Start Where You Are. And I think that was a brilliant, brilliant title, and I learned so much just from the title of the book. I don't think I ever read the book, but just from Start Where You Are is an absolute truth. We have to start with where we are. Where are we? We've got a will to receive. That's our nature. That's our basic nature. That's where we need to begin. Sheze nikra Torah shelo lishma, which means that our practice of Torah starts out by being Torah which is not for its own sake. Achar kach ba'im lishma, only subsequently are we able to come to Torah for its own sake. All right? And that's what the sages tell us. The sages tell us, Le'olam adam yasok b'Torah shelo lishma, k'dei she'yagil Torah lishma, that a person should always occupy himself with Torah which is not for its own sake, for through his practice of Torah which is not for its own sake, he will get to Torah for its own sake. Okay? And so therefore, this is what the order is given in the Torah. Ko Tamar lebeit Yaakov, elu anashim, emor lehen rashei dvarim. Thus, so thus say to the house of Yaakov, these are the women, say to them the heads, the headlines. Hatchalat avodah. All right? The beginning of the work. What's the women? Our will to receive for ourselves alone. Okay? That's where we have to begin. All right? At this point, don't say to yourself, I need to work for the sake of God. And if I'm if I'm not perfect, then what's the point? Because this is what happens. If we imagine that we can just begin from Torah, from our will to receive for ourselves alone, and go straight to Torah Lishma, we're bound to fall down on our face. Okay? It's impossible. We can't leap over stages. All right? And if we try to go straight to Torah Lishma, Torah for its own sake, all right, we simply won't be able to do it. And people just would give up then. All right? That's why it's begin with the beginning. Start with a work where Torah Shelo Lishma, which is the feminine side of ourselves. Okay? Because at that point, that part of ourselves doesn't want to hear that we need to be serving God unconditionally. Because a person not able to keep the Torah for its own sake straight away. Only when we're regular to do the Torah, to do the Mitzvot, it's become, we understand what we're doing. We've got, into the proper habits. We, know the basic Mitzvot. All right. Then Tagid Livnei Israel. Then you can say to the children of Israel, Elu Anashim, Shekvaim Yocholim Lavod Lishma. Then you're able to take the mitzvot that we do, and now that we don't need to work on the actual practice, now we can work on the intention behind it, and work on the intention that instead of having mixed motives, which are also fulfilling our own needs, which is Torah Shelo Lishma, we can bring it into Lahashpia, Torah only for the sake of giving unconditionally to God or to our fellow man. We can tell our more advanced part of ourselves, our more giving part of ourselves, okay, which here is referred to as the man, okay, the more able to give unconditionally, dikdukim, to be exact. Why am I doing what I'm doing? All right? That we become more exact in our intention, that I'm doing it to fulfill the mitzvah of the Creator. All right? I'm doing it from a pure intention. Because now we're able to understand what that means and we're able to put that into practice. They're now able to understand what Torah Lishma could be. Okay? Therefore, it's important that we understand that and that we'll be able to move on from doing Torah Mitzvot with mixed motives to doing Torah Mitzvot for the sake of giving. And this is what it means, that we need to be particular, that whatever we do should be for God's sake. To be specific about what we're doing. Okay? Great. So far, so good? Anybody got any questions? No? Everybody all right?
Yedidah,
Okay. Yeah.
how does a person make that transition?
There's lots of ups and downs, I would say, to that question. All right. It's a good question. How do we make that transition? Rabbi Ashak spends a lot of time, actually. He's got a book, well, there's 4 volumes of his essays called Sefer Ma'amarim. And I would say that the vast majority of those essays are dedicated to precisely that question. because it's a very difficult issue. How do I get from Torah, which is not for its own sake, to Torah for its own sake? And first of all, we need to know there's a lot of ups and downs in that. Because, and this is what he's going to go on to explain here, there's a part of ourselves which is the woman aspect, the will to receive aspect, which is willing to participate in Torah shelo lishma, okay, because it can see it can get a reward. Like if for example a person's doing Torah mitzvot and they believe that through the Torah mitzvot they're going to get, you know, a better life in this world, or some reward in the world to come. These are not small motives; these are big motives. Then you find that the body, the ego, is much more willing to participate. But when we actually want to come to start to work for lishma, that's when the ego protests, because he's no longer gaining anything. Okay, so to come to Torah shel lishma is actually a very difficult stage, because that's when the ego protests. And we have to gradually learn to ask God for help, to let go of the ego, all right, and to simply, you know, say, okay, ego, you know, I hear you're protesting, but I'm going to do it anyhow. You know, it isn't easy. It's a lot of ups and downs. Yes, the only thing, I mean, you learn a lot about it by simply trying it.
Because it's hard to imagine what the goal, like, you know, you haven't experienced it. How do you imagine what the goal is? You know, how does it, you know, what is it you're working to attain? Is it a philosophical thing? You know,
No, it's an actual experience, I think. It's not a philosophical thing. Your question about how do you know when you've got there, really? You know, what are you working
yes.
for? Rav Ashag actually asks this question himself, and he says, it's God himself testifies. God himself will show you where you are. And what he actually calls it is called P'kichat Einayim b'Torah, the opening of one's eyes in Torah. Suddenly a person begins to see and understand the inner meanings of the Torah for himself. He begins to understand what the Torah is saying to him personally. He begins to see also and understand in advance what the reward of the mitzvah is, and what the consequence of a sin is. So he begins to understand and see that. So his whole perception of his relationship with God and the Torah mitzvah changes. So it's actually a change of his own inner reality. There's a very beautiful article written by Baruch Shalom Ashlag, which I actually translated, and it's in Tapestry for the Soul. If you've got Tapestry, you can find it there. I'll tell you where to find it. All right. That's a very, very, very good question. So he compares it in many ways to being on a bus, like you're going on a bus from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he says, you can be very close to Jerusalem, but until you're actually in Jerusalem, you're not in Jerusalem. And you don't really know where you are, how close you are, until you're there, you see. And then it's God himself who testifies that a person has reached that stage of lishma. And his testimony comes about through this whole different perception that he has of Torah and Mitzvot. Okay? All right, very good questions. דבר אחר, goes on to say, למה לנשים תחילה שהן מזלזלות במצוות? היינו בשלו לשמה. Why did he say you've got to tell the women first? Because they are speedy to do the mitzvot. Quick to do the mitzvot. Now remember, he's not talking about women. He's talking about the woman side of ourselves, okay? The part of ourselves which has got a will to receive. Hainu b'shelo lishma. That they're willing to do Torah shelo lishma. There's a part of ourselves which is definitely willing to do Torah shelo lishma, providing that we get a reward for it. Shekavanato lekabel tumah chelef avodato. That we know we'll get a reward for it. As a guf mezrais tadam. Then the guf, the physical body, the ego, the will to receive, says, sure, why not? Great, go for it. Okay, because he's going to get something. All right? So Torah shelo lishma, when a person has still got his will to receive mixed in, then the guf, the ego says, sure, yeah, terrific. Let's do Torah mitzvot on that basis, no problem. But the problem is, of course, that we're not really in affinitive form with the Creator like that. All right? So Torah shelo lishma, all right, needs to be a stepping stone to Torah lishma. And then it's called the maidservant who helps her mistress. All right? So ultimately, if we do Torah shelo lishma, but we want to get to Torah lishma, which is a true connection with God, then the stage of Torah shelo lishma is considered like a maidservant who helps her mistress. Okay, and ultimately, all the work that we do in Torah shelo lishma will also contribute to eventually to our Torah lishma. On the other hand, if we get stuck with Torah shelo lishma, Torah which is not for its own sake, and we think that that's it, that's where we need to be, that's where, we take it as a sort of an end point rather than moving forwards, then this is considered as the maidservant who disinherits her mistress. Okay? And this comes from Proverbs, that for this the earth is angered. All right? What does it mean? Because the Torah shelo lishma, instead of being an intermediary stage, is actually being used instead of coming to Torah lishma. Masha ein kain, al manat lashpia. But if we're talking about Torah, which is for the sake of giving, we do it for the sake of giving. Ein haguf maskim shadam yavod. Okay, the body, the ego, doesn't agree to that. Why not? Because he's not getting a reward. All right, he says, "Whoa, why should I do it?" Okay, mikol sheken lezarez oto. It certainly doesn't. The body doesn't participate. On the contrary, that's when the body begins to feel the ups and downs. That's when the body begins to rebel, and that's when it's very hard work, and that's when we need God to help us. לכן, כשאדם מתחיל את העבודה על מנת לקבל, אזי האדם מרגיל את עצמו להיות זריז בעבודה. So that we need to begin our service of God for the sake of receiving, because then we get ourselves habituated to be quick to do the mitzvah. Lizdarez the mitzvot, to do the mitzvah, to be punctual to do the mitzvah. ואחר כך, אם ההרגל הזה יוכל לשמש גם כן בעת שמתחיל לעבוד על מנת להשפיע. And if he establishes that habit first, even though it's not for its own sake, then he can then use that habit when he begins to work for the sake of giving. מפני שכלי הזריזות כבר קנה מזמן שלא לשמה. So because our vessel of being punctual and careful, quick to do the mitzvot, he already acquired from the time which was not for its own sake. Okay. So Torah shelo lishma is a very valuable stage. Okay, it's an intermediary stage, but it needs to be intermediary, not to get stuck there. On the other hand, the habits that we gain, that we get from Torah shelo lishma, stand us in good stead when we want to move to Torah lishma. Okay. דבר אחר, another aspect. כדי שיהיו מנהיגות את בניהן לתורה. That in order that they should lead their children to Torah. שעניין אב ובן, היינו סיבה מסובב. What is the issue of father and son? This is the issue of cause and effect. זאת אומרת, אם יש מקודם סיבה של קבלה, אוקיי? הסיבה הזו גורמת שירצה לעשות עוד מעשים בתורה המצוות. Okay? If, first of all, there's a reason for receiving, that he feels that through his Torah mitzvot he's going to get something, then it going to cause him that he wants to do more deeds of Torah mitzvot. מה שאין כן בבחינת השפעה, קשה שהגוף ייתן כוח להוסיף. Okay? Whereas when it's the aspect of giving, it's very hard for the ego, for the body, to give extra power. אלא כל פעם צריכים התגברות מחדש. Each time he's got to overcome his ego from the beginning. מה שאין כן, כשעוסק מקודם שלא לשמה, אז הגוף נותן כוח כל פעם להוסיף. But it's not the case when we're practicing Torah, which is not for its own sake, then the ego adds its own power each time. ועל ידי זה, האדם מתרגל בעבודה בזמן ההכנה, and in this way a person gets used to serving God. Admittedly, it's Torah which is not for its own sake, but it's a time of preparation. ויש לו כבר כלים, then he's already got the abilities, he's already got the means, he's already got the vessels, מוכנים לעבודה, ready to serve God, בזמן שהולך על דרך השפעה, which can now bring into his use in the way of Torah Lishma. Okay? Everybody okay? Any questions? All right. ובעת בריאת העולם נסתווה מקודם אדם הראשון. Now we also said at the time of the creation of the world, Adam was told, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. העניין הוא על פי מה שכותב הזוהר הקדוש. The issue is explained by what the Holy Zohar writes. שהאדם הראשון לא הווה לי מהי עולמה כלום. That Adam Rishon, in the way that he was created, didn't have any aspect at all of receiving. הוא היה רק מבחינת 9 ראשונות. He was only created from the framework of holiness, from the first 9 ספירות. אזי מבחינה זו היה הכל בסדר. Okay. From that aspect, everything was okay. אלא על ידי התקללותו מבחינת רצון לקבל, הנקרא בחינת חווה. But he then received the wife, okay, which is also the will to receive, which is Chava. ומבחינת קבלה, לא היה לו הכנה של הלא לשמה. And he didn't have any preparation for how to cope with the will to receive by doing Torah, which is not for its own sake first. All right? שרק אז הסדר שיכולים שרק אז הסדר שיכולים להכניס רצון לקבל, שיהיה קבלה על מנת להשפיע. All right? And he didn't have that process by first being able to keep the commandments, Torah shelo lishma, and then coming to Torah lishma. Okay? כשבא לרצון לקבל נקרא בחינה אישה, והבחינה לשמה הוא כבר השיג מבחינתו עצמו ששורשו כלים להשפעה, לכן עברה וקלקלה העולם. מטעם שהיה חסר לה ההכשרה שלה שלא לשמה, על בחינת רצון לקבל. So what actually happened with Adam and Eve? They thought, and it's written in the Haktamah for the Panim Me'irot U'Masbirot also, they thought that they could just go from giving, because they were created as givers from the framework of holiness, straight to receiving for the sake of giving. But you can't. You've got to have an intermediate stage in between. All right? To join receiving for the sake of giving together. You've got to get used to it. And they didn't have that intermediate stage. So they began simply to receive for themselves alone. Because they didn't have that intermediate thing which they would be able then to transform their will to receive for the sake of giving. They didn't have any intermediate step. All right? And so therefore, this is what the Rambam says. Inyan lishma asor legalot b'pam echad, ela la'at la'at. I think this also answers a little bit of Rachel's question. All right? How do you do this transformation? And Rambam says you mustn't try to tell yourself you've got to do everything perfectly from the beginning. All right? Le'at, slowly, bit by bit. Because if you try to do it, overdo it, you can't do it. You're just going to fall down again. It's be like, Eve in the Garden of Eden. All right? When the serpent told her you need to transform this tree into the sake of giving all in one go, she didn't have any way to be able to do that in a graduated, sensible way. It was too much. Therefore, we first have to practice Torah shelo lishma, which is the feminine aspect within ourselves. Only then we can come to Torah lishma, Torah for its own sake. Okay? Great. Wonderful. All right, that was a way to approach Torah, all right, from Rabbi Ashlag's understanding of that one sentence in this Sidra. We understood from here this one sentence. He gave us a beautiful explanation of how for ourselves to practice to go for our will to receive for ourselves alone, to Torah shelo lishma, to Torah lishma. Okay? I thought that was a incredible tour de force. Now, I've got another one here. It's quite long though. I didn't time this right. Well, we can start. Okay, see how we go. If it takes a few extra minutes, never mind. Again, he's looking at one sentence. All right, and again, we're going to look and see how this sentence applies within one person, within ourselves. Okay? We're not going to look at it in a historical or whatever view. We're going to see how it applies within one person. And this is the one sentence where Yitro has joined the camp of the Israelites, and it says that Moses stood and judged the people from the morning to the evening. All right? But Rashi says, Efshar lomar, can you really say so? אלא כל דיין שדן דין אמת לאמיתו, אפילו שעה אחת. מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו עוסק בתורה כל היום. But somebody who judges a true judgment, even for one moment, the scripture counts it as if he studied Torah all day. וכאילו נעשה שותף לקדוש ברוך הוא במעשה בראשית, and as if he's become a partner with God in the action of creation. שנאמר בו וירא ויבוקר. And we say then it was evening, it was morning. Wow! I mean, just for doing, just for being a judge wow! That's huge. All right? We're going to find out that the judge is not anybody else except ourselves. All right? It's all in ourselves. בגמרא שבת, וכי תעלה על דעתך שמשה יושב ודן כל היום? תורתו מתי נעשית? Can you really imagine that Moses sat and judged the people all day? When did he do the Torah? אלא לומר לך, But it's there to tell you, Kol Dayan Shadan Din Emet Lamito, V'chule Ki'ilu Naseh Shutaf LaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Maseh Bereshit. Very similar. That a judge who judges a true judgment, okay, even one moment, is as if he occupied himself with Torah all the day, and as if he's become like a co-partner with God in the work of creation. But Sanhedrin, in Masachet Sanhedrin, it says, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Kol Dayan Shedan Din Emet Lamito, Mashra Shechina B'Yisrael. Wow. Anybody who does a true judgment brings the Shekhinah in Israel. Shne'ema Elohim nitzav batat el bekev Elohim mishpot. God is standing in the congregation of God. He's standing like together with God. He's judging together with God. V'kol dayan she'no din dan din emet lamito goem lashchina shestalek misrael. And every judge who doesn't judge a true judgment causes the Shekhinah to leave Israel. Shne'emar mishod aniyim en katev yonim ata akum yomar Hashem v'chomer. From the bribe, from the robbery of the poor and the sigh of the poor, I will take vengeance, says the Lord. And in Bava Batra it says, V'maskilim yasu kazor akia. The pure ones will shine like the brightness of the firmament. Who does that refer to? Zed dayan shedan din emet lamito. This is a judge who judges a true judgment. But Matanitna Tana, and we learn in the Braita, V'maskilim yasul b'zor akia, Zed dayan shedan din emet lamito, v'gabay tzedakah. This is a judge who judges a true judgment, and also the Gabai of the tzedakah. And Perush Rashi, the Gabai tzedakah, one who takes does right to the poor. What does he need? Okay. And then the Megillah, it says, V'amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chananya, Atid HaKodesh Baruch Hu liot atorah b'rosh kol tzadik v'tzadik. Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Hananiah, in the future the Holy Blessed One will be like a crown on the head of every righteous man. Shne'emar b'yom hu yeh Hashem tzvot la'teret tzvi. That in the future, on that day, in the day of the Gemara Tikkun, the Lord of Hosts will be like a crown. Ma'u teret letzvi letzvirat tiferet lotzin tzivyono lematzpin tifarto, to enshrine his glory. תעמד לומר לשרמו, לכל שמשים עצמו כשבעים, ולרוח משפט, זה הדן את יצרו, one who judges his own nature. כפו לשוב בתשובה, he forces himself to do תשובה. Okay, יושב על המשפט, זה הדן דין אמת לאמיתו. One who judges a true judgment, ולגבורה, זה המתגבר על יצרו, one who overcomes his own evil inclination. So we've got these different aspects of somebody who judges a true judgment. Well, my question when I read this is, what's this got to do with me? I'm not a judge, all right? What is it to do with me? Why, what's this whole thing about? All right, why are they so concerned? I mean, okay, I appreciate we've got to have proper courts and things, but ad kadei kach, that they, establishing the creation, they're partners with God, they're bringing the Shekhinah in Israel, if God forbid they don't do it right, they're not bringing the Shekhinah. I mean, what is, when I first read this, I think, what's it to do with me at all? In order to understand this, we have to understand it's we're the people who are doing the judging, all right? And this is what he goes on to say. A person always needs to see himself as if he's half worthy and half unworthy. Like He's got half good deeds and half bad deeds, okay? עשה מצווה אחד, השוב שהכריע עצמו לכף זכות. אבל עבירה אחת, אוי לו שהכריע את עצמו לכף חובה. If he does one good mitzvah, it's as if he tilted the balance to the side of merit, and if he did one avirah, it's as if he tilted the balance to the side of a negative side, okay? שנאמר, וחוטא אחד יאבד טובה הרבה. Okay, if he makes one sin, he loses a lot of goodness. Okay? But, אם האדם יודע בעצמו, שיש לו מעט זכויות והרבה עבירות, how can he possibly say he's half and half? But if we say that, you know, if a person knows for himself that he's got a few merits, but mostly negatives, all right, how can he say he's half and half? He can't be a liar. All right? He knows for himself it's not true. How can you possibly say, you know, something which is false, or tell a person to say something about himself which is false? All right. And the answer is that all this is about how we see things in the moment. Like God balances it out so that at every moment we have to see ourselves as equal positive and equal negative, so that we can have free choice. Because if our positive sides were very strong and our negative was very weak, that wouldn't give us free choice. And if our negative was very strong and our positive was very weak, that wouldn't give us free choice either. All right, but since a person mostly is not in total balance, okay, how can we have actually free choice? How can we make a choice to do good or bad? All right. And we get the answer from Masechet Sukkah. And here he says, לעתיד לבוא, מביאו הקדוש ברוך הוא ליצר הרע, ושוחטו בפני צדיקים ובפני רשעים. צדיקים נדמה להם כהר גבוה, ורשעים נדמה להם כחוט השערה. This is all midrash, all right? In the future, the Holy Blessed One brings the Yetzer Hara, and he kills it in front of the tzaddikim and in front of the wicked. For the tzaddikim, it seems to them like a huge mountain, but for the wicked, it seems to them like a little hair's breadth. And you ask the question, Ma Emet, what's the truth? Is the Yetzer Hara like a hair's breadth, or like a little hair, or is it like a high mountain? All right. And what the answer is to this is Kol HaGadol Mechavero Yetzro Gedol Himenu. One who's grows in more zuchuyot, he's given more of a Yetzer Hara, so that he's always got a balance. All right? All right? V'nei yadua, shenitna mitzvot bechira. It's given to us the commandment to choose. All right? That we need to choose the good. All right? And for this, God created us the way he created us, with bad and good within us, so that we get to choose. And the good and the bad actually are only got a choice when they're equal. All right? Then a person can choose in his balance, choose which one he wants to go. But you can't do if the evil in a person is more than the good. He can't make that decision, because the evil on its own will decide for him. Okay? The answer is the choice is in our hands, all right? And we need to make that choice, and that's the mitzvah of the choice. And this is why they said a person should always see himself as if we're half liable and half meritorious. It doesn't mean the sort of baked in you get at the end of our life and then wake up what you really did and what you didn't do. That's not what it's talking about. Okay? What it's talking about is how we decide in the present, in this world. כי האדם יכול לומר, מאחר שיש לו הרבה עוונות, because a person could say, since I've got so many sins, ממילא הרע שלו יותר גדול מהטוב. The evil is greater than the good. So I don't have any power to do any good. He sort of like feels he can give up now. But he has to understand that if he doesn't have much good, then the evil in him isn't that much either. That's why it said for the wicked, it's like a little hair, all right? So in fact, he needs to know that if he doesn't have many mitzvahs, then the evil, whatever it looks like to him, if evil is really only a hair's breadth, though he can deal with it, all right? If a person's got lots of zchuyot, lots of merits, then the evil in him actually does really appear like a high mountain. So that he's got each time, every person always has the power to choose, all right? וזה פירוש. כל דיין שדן דין אמת לאמיתו, all right? This is the real meaning of every judge who judges a true judgment. Who's the judge? Ourselves. כי עניין דיין, הדרך המוסר, הוא נמצא בכל איש פרטי מישראל. The judge is found inside each individual of Israel. כמאמר, אין פורענות באה לעולם, אלא בשביל דייני ישראל. The problems in the world only come because of the judges of Israel. Who's that? Us. Okay? האדם בזמן שהוא צריך לעשות איזו עשייה, okay? A person needs to make a decision each time. We need to make a judgment each time. So each one makes a choice. All right? How are we going to choose? So when it said, that Moses stood and judged all the day, all right, and then it talks about all these incredible aspects which happen because of the judgment. What is it really talking about? It's talking about each one of us at every moment, okay, when we've got the possibility of doing good or bad. We mustn't think about ourselves that we can't do something good because we've got so much negative bad habits or something. We have to know that in every single moment we truly do have free choice. That if we think that we've only, we haven't got much good merits, and we haven't got much bad in us either. At that moment, we have the power to overcome it. All right? We have the choice. At least we've got the choice to want to do good. All right? And if we're not managing, we can ask God to help us. All right? And also not to look with envy at the great tzaddikim and think, it's easy for them. No, it isn't. They've got the same difficulty of choice because as they do more mitzvot, the Yetzer Hara appears to them like a big mountain. All right? So we're all equal in that respect. We're all partners in God in that respect. And if we do good choices, we bring the Shekhinah to Israel. Okay? So this is basically, it's quite a long article. I mean, I didn't get the timing right here. So I just sort of like summarized it mostly, all right, for ourselves, all right, to actually find out what this issue of the judgment is. Like Moses judging the people all the day. What does it really mean? It means the Moses within us, the one who gives us the Torah, also gives us the power to make that decision between, am I going to do something good? Am I going to do something negative? And to know that we always have free choice. Doesn't matter what we've done in the past. Forget the past. In the present, everything is balanced and we have the power to choose. Okay? All right. So I think we'll stop there. All right, everyone? So there's lots and lots and lots of, in this particular Sidra. I mean, there's just so much. You could learn this Sidra, for the whole year. All right, so I really want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom, okay? And have happy happy time in Shul. Bezrat Hashem, hear the 10 Commandments. All right, be at Mount Sinai. And Bezrat Hashem. See you all next week.
Okay,
Shabbat
thank you.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye then.
Bye.
Thank you, Yedidah.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye then.